are demanding Congress to keep a promise to take care of those who braved Ground Zero. The debate was especially heated following the death of NYPD Lieutenant Marcy Sims, who died from lung cancer last week. CBS 2's Emily Smith here now with more. Emily?
Dana, due in part to Sims' death, Mayor de Blasio says a bipartisan letter has been sent today to House Speaker Paul. Not a matter of party, but a matter of patriotism to reauthorize the World Trade Center health program.
It was just smoky. You felt like it was burning your throat.
That's now deceased NYPD Lieutenant Marcy Sims in a video from last year talking about responding to the World Trade Center on 9/11. She died last week, ultimately laid to rest Sunday, 14 years after tirelessly working in the rubble. A lung cancer diagnosis changed her life about 18 months ago. Despite insurmountable pain, her health care costs were the one thing she didn't have to worry about, all covered under the James Zadroga Act, a health plan named after an NYPD cop who died of cancer in 2006 from 9/11 aftermath. The Zadroga Act has been offering treatment to all heroes until now, leaving Mayor de Blasio with an urgent call to Congress.
If there is not action soon, thousands of our heroes will be left without the medical treatment they need, without the monitoring they need.
Many of those first responders came from across the country, creating a national response. So far, 33,000 people have developed 9/11 related illness, with fear the number will grow.
We received a record number of new claims in 2018, and we are on pace to exceed that number in 2019. The issue is basic math. Almost $5.2 billion awarded to nearly 22,500 individuals, just over $2 billion left, with over 21,000 claims and amendments still needing a decision, and thousands more expected to be filed before the VCF's December 18th, 2020 deadline. Several trends help us understand how we got here. Since reauthorization of the Zadroga Act in December of 2015, we have seen a dramatic increase in claims filed on behalf of those who have died as a result of their 9/11 related exposure, a significant increase in cancer claims, and a marked increase in claims from survivors, meaning those who lived, worked, or went to school in the affected areas.
There's a new proposition to reduce the bill, putting a cap on money for the program and limiting it to expire in 5 years.
Cancer doesn't know a 5-year limit.
We spoke with Sims' sister, who says she'd be fighting for justice with her husband and family at her side.
She has an amazing personality. When she walked in the room lit up.
With 72,000 first responders and survivors giving their all at Ground Zero, our city leaders say that's 72,000 reasons for Congress to act now and extend the Zadroga Act permanently.
It's bad enough it took nearly 10 years to pass it, and an estimated 1,000 firefighters who worked at Ground Zero have been diagnosed with some form of cancer. More than 100 have died from illnesses as a result of 9/11, that according to the deputy chief. And that doesn't even include the NYPD and other rescue workers who went down there to help. And the stakes, they could not be higher. Take a listen to what NYPD officer David Hawley had to say.
People are going to die. The men and women that are sick, that are being taken care of now, I've only been cancer-free a little over a year.
Hawley is one of the first responders who went to Washington last week to speak at a congressional hearing about the Zadroga Act. The money, it is set to run out this October, and now supporters want to extend it indefinitely.
Districts. The bill needs to be passed.
The part I don't get is, of the 435 members of Congress, something like 420-something of them came down to Ground Zero. I don't know a person, after they see it and the scope of it, that doesn't walk away, with a jaw somewhere around their feet. How could so many of these guys go back to Washington after seeing it and fight for so long, whether it be for Zadroga funding, just funding overall for New York, or even the interoperability for the radio? That's the part I don't get. And you've been to D.C. too many times to count now.
Every time I inhaled, my mouth just filled up with it. I was choking. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I was just saying to myself and saying out loud that I didn't want to die. I didn't want to die.
Marcy survived, but the effect of that day reverberated through her life like it did for so many. Gripped by depression, she descended into alcoholism and drug abuse, losing custody of her children. But 4 years ago, she went into rehab and turned her life around. Then, like many people caught at Ground Zero, Marcy was diagnosed with cancer. She blamed the particles she breathed in on September the 11th. Hers was far from the only personal image from the Twin Towers attack.
Make the funding available.
Well, one, thank you for having me. I'm humbled. You know, most people around the country, they remember 9/11 as two buildings coming down and 2,751 innocent lives lost to senseless violence. Later that afternoon, another building did come down. And since then, about 1,700 people have died from 9/11 related illnesses. Over 70,000 people now are enrolled in a World Trade Center health program, getting treated for their 9/11 related illnesses. 429 out of 435 congressional districts were represented during the 10-month cleanup at Ground Zero. Somebody from every state came to New York and helped. So during our darkest hours as a nation, the American spirit shined and rise to the occasion and brought hope to this country. But it's hard to wrap your arms around it, and it's hard to digest and articulate why 14 years later we're still fighting for those who are sick and suffering, those who have debilitating illnesses. Right now, NIOSH, who administrates the healthcare side of the James Hidroga Health and Compensation Act, has certified over 3,800 9/11 related cancers. Just imagine how many they haven't certified. I built a park on Long Island. We have almost 600 names on our wall now. We're slowly catching up to that 1,700 that have passed away. But I've never seen so much pain and suffering, and I can't imagine what Vietnam veterans came home, what they had to go through. But in my generation, before 9/11, I went to one funeral for my grandfather. And I've been now to 144 funerals. I've never seen so many people suffer. And
favorite for, because I want you to put a human face on this for some folks. Greg Quibell, talk about who he was and what he went through.
Greg Quibell was a United States Marshal, and Greg died painfully from leukemia because of his 9/11 illnesses. And Greg, you know, I've helped tens of thousands of people since 9/11, and he was one of that handful of people that I got close to. And when Greg passed away, I was holding his hand. And I was in a room filled with his family. Many of them I didn't know. And Greg's last words were, "John, make sure my family's taken care of." And the weight on my shoulders for that is amazing. And his family is doing better. And like many others, though, they're waiting for their Victims' Compensation Fund, which is the compensation part of the James Hidroga Health and Compensation Act. And there's 18,000 claims on that. And about 5,000 people have been awarded their claims now. So, but Greg, like a lot of others, and John McNamara, the firefighter, who I am now really close with his widow and his son Jack, these stories are heart-wrenching. And the pressure to keep producing, keep performing 14 years later.
I'm always coughing and headaches and sleepless nights. Nightmares, anxiety, and visions haunt me every day. And I'm all alone except for my dearest loved ones.
9/11, like me.
No one cares on the job. They tell me I'm fine, go back to work. But truthfully, I haven't felt this bad in my life.
James Hidroga died on January 5th, 2006, 4.5 years after he raced into the cloud of dust.
Chemo.
Pathologist Dr. Breton did the autopsy and agreed to this exclusive interview.
68 rounds.
I was immediately
Many others
struck
haven't had
by
the
the
opportunity
enormous size of his lungs.
And some have had none. You made me pain and suffering down here of 69 rounds of chemo, countless other treatments. It is my goal and surgeries, and it is my legacy to see that you do the right thing for all 9/11 responders. Please understand that we are not here for anything for ourselves.
Oh my God, they even have to say that?
We became police officers.
Into the cloud of dust. Pathologist Dr. Breton did the autopsy and agreed to this exclusive interview.
I was immediately struck by the enormous size of his lungs.
Zadroga's lungs were 3 times the normal weight. When Breton looked at the slides of the lung tissue, he found out why. The lungs were full of debris.
These are the microscopic sections of the lung. It's kind of opaque and pink here, and these, I suspect, they are dust. You see this fine material there? Look, it's kind of look like fibers.
The autopsy slides reveal he had almost no functioning lung tissue. At least 80% of his lungs were filled with granulomas, giant cells that form around foreign objects.
So that the person is actually being asphyxiated with his own lung, because his lung was being replaced by these foreign body granulomas. When you tell me that the person was helping in cleaning ground zero, he was exposed to all kind of foreign debris. When you tell me that the person was helping in cleaning
Getting the
ground
truth
zero,
and protecting
he
people
was
are part of the EPA's mandate.
to all kind
But
of
if
foreign
the air at
debris.
ground zero was safe,
And I find this
why were so many people
in
getting
this
sick?
lung. I have to
Even some of EPA's own staff doubted. For the first time, a death had been directly attributed to the dust at ground zero. But at New York City Hall, the mayor's office viewed the results as inconclusive. Even 5 years later, government officials are reluctant to admit the link between exposure at ground zero and...
But we're going to wish you the best of it anyway, and thank you so much for making some time for us tonight.
I'm humbled, sir.
People aren't okay afterwards. It's not like there were some that were sick. There are people sick to this day that you're still trying to get the care for. And come October of this year, it expires and funding runs out next year, right?
Correct.
Just talk about how critical this window of time is for Washington to do the right thing.
You know, I'll say this, and I've said it a million times. Our nation's leaders, our elected officials in D.C., have a moral responsibility. Their first priority is to serve and protect their constituents, and many of them failed at that. We're ahead of the curve of where we were in 2010 when we got the bill passed. We have 86 co-sponsors now in the House and 19 in the Senate. People are getting it. We were going on in human emotions and telling our stories back in 2010, 9, 8, 7, 6, and 5. Now we have statistics and facts.
Lower Manhattan, but to all of New York City and to the entire country. And so I am sorry, and I apologize, and hopefully we'll never have to do this again. But I also have a warning. Today, on the Hill, you will be exposed to possibly toxic levels of bullshit. And arrogance. You're strong men and women, but these are conditions you...
Things get destroyed. Some things you can't fix. Some things you just can throw away. Let's figure this out.
Mrs. Whitman went on national TV, smiled at the camera, and told everybody everything is safe, and it wasn't.
As I say, you know asbestos was in there, is in those buildings, lead is in those buildings. There are the VOCs. However, the concentrations are such that they don't pose a health hazard. We're going to make sure everybody's safe.
Sadly, the only people who don't seem to see it reside on Capitol Hill. And it's time that they see it. The thing that they can overcome, you don't understand, that was the thing that gave me sustenance that day, the thing that gave me strength that day, the thing that carried me through those terrible moments was the power and the heart of the first responders behind me. And it's still there today. I'm embarrassed.
Love it.
I'm here today basically to apologize. So I don't really want to talk to you guys, I want to talk to them. I want to apologize to all the men and women, the first responders, that you had to come down here today. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for our country. I'm embarrassed for New York. I'm embarrassed that you, after serving so selflessly with such heroism, have to come down here and convince people to do what's right for the illnesses and difficulties that you suffered because of your heroism and because of your selflessness. Nobody had to lobby you to rush to those towers on that day. I was living in downtown Manhattan, and I can never repay the debt to the first responders who came down and brought stability and humanity, not just to Lower Manhattan, but to all of New York City and to the entire country. And so I am sorry, and I apologize, and hopefully we'll never have to do this again.
Afternoon. I have several announcements. Every doctor, every hospital, every nurse have been notified. Every woman in this country must be aware that it's most important that they check their medicine cabinet and that they do not take this drug.
In the early 1960s, no drug stress more theory at its worst.
So far have not received the rich company that made the drug which crippled them so brutally.
But this shows it helped us get to the finish line and save a lot of lives. And we can joke about it and we can look back about it, a Democrat and a Republican, but at the end of the day, you saved Americans' lives. And at the end of the day, Richie and myself, we don't care who helps us as long as they help us.
And it's not as if people are asking for things that they don't deserve or that haven't already been put into place, Richard. It's just that for some reason this bill was a temporary thing. Why was it temporary?
The Victims' Compensation Fund, which has a short time frame and is probably going to run out of money even before the end of 2020 at this current rate with the number of people that are coming down with these horrendous cancers. And we're talking cancers on steroids. And we, as John so aptly said, that we are trying to be ahead of the curve before we have to bring sick and dying down to Washington as we did the last time. And we can't bring the same people down because they're no longer with us. We have a whole new crop of people that we're going to have to drag down to Washington. We'd really like to avoid that pain and suffering for everyone involved.
There's over 10,000 people now with a certified 9/11 related cancer. The government says, yes, 9/11 caused your cancer. We're going to outnumber those who died on 9/11 because of senseless violence by the 20-year anniversary. We're going to outnumber those who died on 9/11 because of senseless violence by the 20-year anniversary.
I'm a public speaker and I have emotions. Are you going to be able to handle it? I don't know, man. They're walking towards it. Why do you think there's no sound? Because it's too horrible.
Tuesday will mark 17 years since the terrorists killed thousands in New York, D.C., and Pennsylvania. But many of those who survived the attacks of 9/11 are still suffering the effects. Thousands are now fighting cancer and other illnesses after inhaling all of that toxic dust for more than a month at Ground Zero. There are programs which offer help and compensation to first responders and survivors, but some of those who need the help are not getting it. John Stewart, John Field, and Richard Alice have spent years fighting to help 9/11 survivors. And I spoke with them earlier this week.
You know, Richie and John and I and everyone else from down there, we'll never forget roaming the halls with our good friend Ray Pfeiffer, who had stage 4 cancer and spent his last weeks fighting for his brothers and sisters to get this passed, because that's the type of person that he was and that's the type of courage. But man, I hope we never have to waste someone else's precious time that they could have with their families on that type of thing. It should no longer be that these guys have the burden of proof to their own government about what has happened to them. They were told down there the air was safe. Clearly it wasn't. And so, you know, in honor of him, these guys will never stop fighting, and in honor of everybody else. But can't we make this time finally give them some peace? That's all.